It's a very worrying indeed. I mean, in the past, the government have pressed protests using tear gas and veiled threats, and I fear that the violence is going to escalate this time round. And so if the military and the police go onto the streets in force, we could see an increased amount of deaths and severe injuries in the days that come.
Well, what makes this wave of protests different from previous rallies against disputed elections in the country?
The demographics who are protesting are slightly different. So in the past, it's largely been middle-class people, very young people, people who are historically opposed to the government. This time round, a lot of that sector have left the country, and so what we're seeing now is a lot of people coming from the poorer urban areas. They are on motorbikes, many of them carry guns, and so the characteristics, the demographic characteristics of the protests have changed, and we have a large number of people coming out as well. So the next massive gathering is due to take place this Saturday, the 17th of August, so it'll be worth keeping an eye on that.
And what are protesters demanding?
Well, they want the government to look again at the results of the elections. The Maduro government has declared that it won the elections, but has provided no evidence for that fact. The opposition are claiming also that they've won the evidence, the elections, and they are providing some evidence. And various political leaders and organisations around the world have come out and declared their support of the opposition. But so far, the government and the Electoral Council have yet to concede.
Well, the leader of the opposition and her replacement, when she was banned from running for president, have both fled. Why do they fear for their lives?
It's a very hostile situation, a very polarised situation. It has not been unknown for political leaders to be attacked or to be disappeared or to be taken into incarceration or put under house arrest. And so they face threats not only from representatives of the state actors, but also non-state actors who are allied with the government. It's a threat that could mean physical harm, but also it could mean imprisonment, and they want to continue in their political campaign. So it makes sense for them to conceal their whereabouts while they see out this tumultuous period.
Well, how does this affect the opposition's ability to campaign for their case?
Well, in some ways, the kind of first few days after the election, although, of course, wasn't entirely in the opposition's favour, was in some ways beneficial to them because they have had a lot of international support. They've had various governments in the region and worldwide declare their support for the opposition. And so they're receiving a lot of publicity. All of that kind of publicity feeds into their fight. So in the initial kind of period where there's a lot of excitement and people are still ready to fight, then that works well for them. As time goes on, they will struggle more to campaign, especially if they remain away from the country, the leaders, and especially if the government does come out, the Maduro government does come out in full force, because of course the consequence of that is likely that the desire to protest will go down if the rate of killings and injuries goes up.
What do you foresee happening next? Presumably rallies will grow. Will this put enough pressure on Nicolas Maduro to cede to protesters' demands? Will there be a relook at the disputed election results?
We have seen in the past 5 years or so that popular protests no longer seem to be enough to put pressure on the government. As you've mentioned, there have been several waves of intense protests over the course of the Maduro administration, and they have not been sufficient to topple his regime. And so my prediction would be that protests alone will remain insufficient, even though, as we've mentioned, the demographic character of the protests have changed. I think in order for real change to come, the military needs to support the people in the streets. And at the moment, the military, in fact, support Maduro. And as far as I can see, there's not a whole lot of incentive for them to betray Maduro. And so as long as the military remain loyal to Maduro, I'm afraid that Maduro will remain in power.
What influence do external parties have, countries such as the US, and what about the EU? Can they make an impact? Do sanctions work?
Yeah, they do have some influence. Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader or former opposition leader, has said that she is willing to negotiate with the Maduro administration. So she's not willing to share power, but she is willing to negotiate and to look at revisiting the sanctions so that the Maduro or allies with the Maduro government have options for what to do if their government falls. So that is where I think the international powers have perhaps the most capacity to change the situation. It's to participate in discussions about a transition. It's to offer conditions for the Maduro administration and its representatives to give them incentives to leave power, because at the moment there are very little incentives for them to consider handing over the reins.
Well, Dr. Jarman, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate talking to you.
Pleasure.